Hello, everyone. My name is Josh, or Captain Ketter, on the Discord. Today, I want to welcome you to a new podcast and project that we'll be working on that we're calling the Speculation Station. This involves myself and members of our community in Star Wars Armada here in the Dallas community. With me, I have Austin, who goes by Sir Reidiculous on the Discord. Say hi to Austin.
Hey guys.
I'm also joined by Ryan, who goes by Plague of Shadows on the Discord.
Everyone.
He just said hello. It's a little hard to hear him because of his, what was it called, Ryan?
The con flu has currently kicked my voice out.
Yeah, it's a rough one. I know what that feels like. And then finally, I'm joined by Chris, who goes by Rouge Commander on the Discord.
Hello, everybody.
All right. So the purpose of this interview is Austin and Ryan were the first two from our community in recent memory that went to Worlds. And so we wanted to kind of pick their brain and see what their experience was. So with that, I'll leave it to Chris to ask the first question here.
All right. So these questions are apparently trademarked by another podcast, the Armada podcast. I got their permission to use them.
Oh,
yeah. So we're in the clear to ask these very questions. So I'll start with Ryan. Ryan, how long have you been playing Armada? What was your starting point in the game?
I started playing on release. Whenever the game first came out, one of my roommates and I just happened to see it and thought, "Oh, this seems like fun." So we bought in and split the starter pack. He hated it. I loved it. So I ended up keeping both halves, and then just kept buying more stuff as it came out. Intermittent, had some breaks here and there, but largely just since release.
And what is your playstyle preference at the moment? Where do you find yourself consistently over the last 6 months to a year?
Super Star Destroyer, big heavy ship, just flying a giant brick across the board.
Okay. All right. All right. And Austin, how about you? How long have you been playing? What was your starting point with Armada?
yeah. So first off, I want to say for Ryan's sake, we are recording this about a week after the World's tournament, so that's why his voice is still
Yes.
like it is. But I've been playing for just over like weeks over a year. So I picked it up about a year ago with a buddy of mine. We Ryan, he and I, other Ryan, picked it up after seeing a TikTok explaining the very basic rules of the game. And we both had a lot of free time at the time and just dove head first into it. Yeah, so just a little over a year.
Awesome. And Ryan, you and he play online a lot. Has he come out to the stores very often?
Yeah, Ryan Eccles, he's Captain Reckles on the Discord. He is he does play competitively, but I go to a lot more tournaments than him, but he does come out to the local tournaments and everything. Absolutely.
So, and in your year of playing, what have you kind of settled on as a newer player? What have you settled on at the moment?
So, as a newer player, the niche that I really found was with kind of glass cannon kind of play. I really love Dodonna and the Liberty. I'm a very Rebels player, so that's where I settled for this year. But there's going to be a lot of experimentation in this coming year now that first year has passed.
Actually, that's a good question for both of you. Are you planning on? I know Austin, you've primarily been Rebels, and Ryan, and the time that you and I have played together, I think you've mainly played Empire. Are y'all looking at different factions for the new season, or are you going to stick with what you've been playing?
Ryan, you want to start with that?
Sure. So, I'm going to change how I'm playing, but I think I'm going to stick with Empire. I just like my big fancy Dorito chips. They're just
Okay.
they're just great. I love it so
Gotcha.
much.
So I will. Rebels are near and dear to my heart. Whenever I split that starter pack with my buddy, he took Empire, I took Rebels, and it's one of those. I'm very contrarian. I play Dodonna because people say that nobody likes Dodonna anymore, and I play Rebels because everybody plays Empire. I'm probably going to begrudgingly experiment with Empire in
Okay.
this coming year, given my kind of quasi aggressive play style.
Yep.
They seem to suit that pretty well. So I might toy around with them a little bit, see what works. But Rebels will always be the comfort spot.
Your primary. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. Very cool. I think I've been primarily Rebels most of my playtime. A little bit of Gar here and there, but yeah, you kind of have your favorites. Josh, what about you?
So for myself, I didn't realize I was actually going to answer this question.
I'm just curious. Now I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I started playing back in 2019. I had thought about buying the core set for a very long time, and I finally found it on sale. I had no one to play with, so I called up one of my buddies, and then we took the core set out together, played it, and we played it wrong as you do
Yeah.
the first time you play through the game.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my favorite thing about that was at the time we didn't realize that you could use only one defense token of the same type. So we, as the Nebulon was actually kind of good because you could double brace. So you could brace something and then brace it again. That was the idea that like was in my head at the time. And then later on, the truth came around that no, the Nebulon is actually kind of garbage unless you have Vanguard and take it to Worlds. So
I was about to say, it literally just won Worlds, so pump the brakes there.
yeah, but that was the start of my play experience, and then I roped another friend into it. He goes by Berg on the Discord, and he and I played against each other many, many times, and then we decided we really like this game. We should actually go and try out a competitive competition. So at the heels of COVID, we went to our first tournament, and we drove from Southwest Missouri to Louisville, Kentucky, and
Oh my
it was an extreme like marathon of a drive just to go play a Saturday tournament. But that was our first experience playing at a tournament, and we were already hooked on the game. And then by going, meeting people who also loved the game and like having a little competition, we were both competitive people. We were hooked even more. I guess we were hooked before. Now we're hooked line and sinker. But I've been playing ever since I moved to Arkansas, where I played with a person many people know. His name is Ben. Goes by Downsized on the Discord, and also on media. You can find him on YouTube. But yeah, my play style has been mainly Rebels, and that was due to just the luck of the draw kind of at the core set. We flipped a coin to see who would play which, and I ended up with Empire actually. And then I told my buddy, I was like, I don't think I can do this. This doesn't feel right, so I need to switch to Rebels.
Yeah.
So I switched to Rebels, and ever since I play kind of cagey just because you have to with like a CR90 and all the stuff that I played with previously. But kind of like Austin, I like to play things that people don't see in the meta. I like to play, I wouldn't say counter meta, but not meta adjacent either. Just something wacky that people don't know how to approach when they see it.
Janky.
But yeah, janky, I guess. Janky, but I think functional is my idea.
There you go.
So that's kind of been my play style.
Very cool. Do you wanna pick up from there?
Absolutely.
All right.
So questions to you two. How did you prepare for Worlds? And then what fleets did you end up bringing?
I can definitely start with that. So this was kind of the first time that I've really practiced for a tournament. All previous competitive tournaments and everything, of course, there was playing around and stuff like that and figuring out what I wanted to bring, like to the Lone Star Open, LSO, and other, like weekend competitive store championship tournaments. But this one was very, okay, what worked for me in previous stuff? What do I see in the overall meta, like worldwide? And how do I prepare for that? I actually had a lot of help from the other three guys on this podcast. Chris, Josh, and Ryan all played practice games with me, and I'm very thankful for that. It was definitely a situation of, okay, take the fleet that worked, and what do I need to change to make that viable at the higher level? The Texas meta is very big ships, big ships, lots of dice. And certain things really work well in our meta that don't work incredibly well at the national and international level. And it was trying to figure out that nice balance of, having only played a year, the stuff that I knew worked well and that I knew how to run, while also incorporating some of those new elements enough to make things viable. So, yeah, lots of practice games, lots of little tweaks, lots of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
That's great. Ryan, how did you prepare for Worlds? And
Austin, what fleet did you end up bringing to Worlds?
Oh, yeah. So I wound up bringing a variation on the fleet that I'd been running all year. Like I said, I run Dodonna mainly. So Dodonna, Liberty, Moncaron, with XX9s to get those lovely crits. MC30 with Foresight, CR90, Jaina's Light. I put Dodonna on that. And a fistful of squadrons, each with like bomber and things like that to try and screen other squadrons. That was what I wound up taking. And there were lots of little changes and everything to what I'd been running for the 9 months previous to when I got my invite.
So I'm sorry to interject, Josh and Ryan.
That's all right. I think I'll wrap around back to what the game plan is going into Worlds. But Ryan, what fleet did you bring, and how did you prepare that for Worlds?
So preparing for Worlds, I kind of bounced around between a bunch of different fleets. I was trying to see how well I would do going with what's like the international meta, your cogs, your Sloans, stuff like that, and it was just stuff that I wasn't super used to playing here, and so I eventually just decided, I'm going to go with what I'm comfortable with, what I know how to fly real well. So I stuck with my SSD, and of course I did the Jerry. I went a little defensive side because I knew most people were going to be playing very offensive lists. So I figured if I could keep the amount of people that could cripple me down, I would probably have a lot more. Or a lot fewer close games. So I did the Palpatine, Damage Control Officer, Vanto, and then other stuff was I had like the leading shots, SW7s, XI7s, XX9s, Ravager, all the other traditional stuff. And then I had the Vader Comsnet Gazanti and then Honda Repair Cruise Gazanti.
Okay. Yeah, when you say kind of the traditional design, that reminds me of a little experience I had that I can share a little bit. My buddy Berg that I was talking about before, he, I think, pioneered the traditional design for the SSD. He took it to the Lone Star Open 2 years ago, I believe now, and went undefeated with it. until the last match where he lost to friend of the podcast, Fox Omega from the Armada podcast. And I had quite the experience in the months leading up to that tournament where I was facing that thing every single time we met up for our first game. So I had I got brutalized by that list for several months. Yeah, that was where I, what is the word? Sharpen my teeth or something in Armada. I don't know the saying.
Cut your teeth.
Cut your teeth. Yeah. Anyway,
months against an SSD, I feel more.
I was about to say
teeth kicked in.
Yeah,
that is accurate. Actually, like that's how it felt. It did give me a lot of experience against SSDs though, and then I learned how to take it down and how to maneuver around it, how to play against it, all that stuff. So let's go back to Austin. What was your game plan going into day one? All right, so knowing some of our experiences leading up to Worlds, what was your game plan, Austin, going into day one of Worlds?
Well, so I was actually talking about this with Chris just before the interview. Kind of the game plan in general was stick to what I know. I'm a fairly new player to the game and everything, so practicing a lot. I got experience against other fleets, but relative to a lot of other people at the tournament, I didn't have quite as much experience. So fly what I know, fly it the way that I know how, and try and have fun.
I think that's the best way to try to play the game, especially in that highly competitive situation. I imagine that was pretty stressful, even, trying to relax, going in with that mentality. I mean, was the size of the competition ever a factor, or did you just kind of go with it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, do you mean like, was I ever daunted by the person across from me, or do you mean like...
Yeah.
I had a buddy before I left for Worlds that kind of put it in perspective of I was saying to him, I was like, I'm going to look across the table and that's going to be like some of the best competition I've ever played. And he was like, they're thinking the same thing about you. And that kind of put it all into perspective. It was definitely anxious. I was headed into day one. Had to take some deep breaths after we deployed in the first game, before I really started thinking about, okay, now let's play the game. But yeah, it daunting but manageable, we'll say.
Gotcha. Ryan, what about you? What was your game plan going into day one with your SSD?
So I knew I was gonna fly against some fleets that are very hard counter SSDs, and with my fleet, my decision was, or my fleet was built around going second and really playing those objectives. And so my whole goal was to, be the big immovable object to take up space and get my objectives. There's my contested outpost, or use my size to swing around and do my dangerous territory and stuff like that. And it worked fairly well as far as doing the objective stuff worked fairly well. I ran into problems with the Mercy mission and the Kraken being able to just fly around and do everything else, and then Cog just being a can opener of a fleet.
That's a term I keep hearing a lot lately. Is this can opener kind of archetype seeming to come back? Something that can tear apart SSDs or the big ships a little bit easier.
I'd like to jump in on that, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So the way COG works mostly is it gives you overwhelming dice pools, and it just gives incredible token stress. And I think that has been kind of the biggest factor in some of the most successful fleets is giving token stress to usually a tank, but sometimes multiple ships. So it becomes a can opener for a single ship, and then for multiple ships, it has the opportunity to spread its firepower out.
Yeah.
Anything that can bring token stress mechanics like boarding troopers or a succession of firepower like Cog brings with 3 ships that can hit a single ship at a single turn, that essentially becomes a can opener fleet. So I would argue the same thing is true if you bring like gunnery team MC-80 Liberties, which it's not a thing right now. But
Whoa. That's literally what I flew.
I said plural.
No, I'm just teasing.
Plural.
No, I know. I'm just teasing.
But you've got to hit something more than one time to make that stress happen, make them think whether they're going to use it or not. But boarding troopers gives you the opportunity to just strip it away, and I think that is something that's this year, this competitive season, I think we're going to see a lot more of.
Yep. I'm trying to decide for my next game if I want to bring something like that to start testing out, or just if I want to keep working on what I've been working on. But there's some really interesting lists there at Worlds that we can kind of talk about next. What kind of competition did y'all face in your matches across the day, and how did your game plan fare?
So like the first round was that mirror SSD, and he picked contested outpost, and so I just deployed right in front of mine, or I deployed it where my SSD was within 1, and then just sat there and let him come to me. And ultimately, what it came down to was the fact that we went halfsies on our Superstar Destroyers. So my game plan of sit on the objective and be big, it worked, but it just we ended up having the SSDs be the deciding factor. Which if I'd gotten off 2 more wounds, would have got a table there, which might have changed how things went, because my next matchups were not grand.
What were some of the other fleets he faced?
The other fleet I faced, the next fleet I faced was the Republic Mercy mission, and I just couldn't get the SSD to turn fast enough or far enough to actually deal with the Mercy mission stuff, because he just deployed everything else on the other side of the board, and then mirrored my SSD with his Mercy mission ship, and then just flew around.
Well, I think in my brief experience with Gar, that Mercy mission card is I think it is a defining card for that faction, because it just has such an effect. Yeah,
40 points is not a joke,
and 40 points that is independent of whatever objective you're running.
Yeah,
because he picked dangerous territory, so I had to send my support Gazantes to go pick up other objective stuff. So my overall plan, worked well. That was I went a 6-5 win to a 6-5 loss. And then after that was Cog, which, he just picked contested outpost, so that my strategy was to have to sit back. What I did was I put my Gazanti on near the outpost and tried to have my SSD in a more maneuverable position, and he just ignored the Gazanti and just came after the SSD. I was like, okay, so I'm just going to get objective points from it, and then but I popped his Gladiator, and he also, because he had Gladiator, Gazani, Onager, and Kuat, and I popped the Gazani because he threw it in front of me, and I was like, well, I don't have anything else to shoot at, so I might as well remove this. But then I popped the Gladiator, and I did the vast majority of the damage on the Kuat, but I just couldn't get across the board fast enough, and with the way he positioned his other ships to get to the Onager to stop it from popping me. And then with the Kraken CR90 spam, it was just he picked a dangerous territory, and then just didn't care that he flew stuff everywhere. And then once the objectives were secured, he just spread out and ended up being another 6-5 in his favor.
So a marginal win, but able to.
Yeah. So nobody that I played moved on to day 2, but neither
Right.
did I. 'Cause other than the cog list, all my other games were pretty much split down the middles.
With that experience, I know you had said that you were thinking about taking a brief break from the SSD, but if you pick it up again, is there anything in your list design that would change significantly?
So I figured that I was going to be playing against, cogs was a big thing, and then I was expecting, Sloane's, the heavy hitting fleets. That I went with a little more defensive on my SSD. I think that if I were to take the SSD again, I would, put price on there. Probably drop the XX9s and put on something more like LTTs to get more of that dice. And just go with a little more aggressive side overall, and then just say, like, damn the objectives. I'm just going to beat you with my big stick, and see, because that seemed to be a more effective play with the SSD
Right.
against what I was flying.
That makes sense. And that's the kind of ship that can kind of fill both those roles. Sometimes, if the matchup's right, simultaneously where you're sitting back but also able to dominate the play area pretty effectively. So it's definitely an archetype that is still competitive, obviously, and doing pretty well. What about you, Austin? What sort of lists did you see on the other side of the table, and how did the Dodonna game plan hold up?
Well, so speaking back to the game plan, I know I gave kind of a vague answer at the beginning there. My game plan as kind of a glass cannon fleet, I kind of fly a quasi like can opener fleet.
Okay.
So my game plan was pretty aggressive, very, kill them before they can kill me.
Yep.
I also like to, because I get a little rash sometimes as like a new player. I get excited sometimes whenever it's like, oh yeah, it's all coming together. Also kind of a low and slow kind of approach. Keep everybody at, low speeds until it seemed like the time to pounce.
Right.
For the most part, my first two games that did work pretty well. My first game I played against a Onager ISD Gladiator pair. Cog. I think I played against Cog. Now that I think about it, killed the Onager, killed the ISD. But was not able to finish off the Gladiator. It essentially came down to, I can't remember if we said this earlier. My MOV on that first game was 1 point between the two of us, 6-5 in my favor. The second game, if I'd gotten one more damage on that Gladiator, I would have been a 10-1, but wound up getting away. The big lesson from that game, and pretty much from all of my games, honestly, is dice fixing and having reliable dice fixing. So I really love leading shots. I really love, some of those other cards, but having something like LTTs, which no matter the distance, you're getting a reroll. No sacrificing dice to get rerolls with those sorts of cards, that sort of thing. That is incredibly important, and probably something that I'll be changing up in the future. My second game was against a CIS 134 squads.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, two recusants on the other side of the board. So it was a 2 activation with a ton of squadrons. It was. That was where I really shot myself in the foot.
Okay.
To make it, kind of a quick explanation, I chose Rift Ambush and flung the Liberty around the Rift and had a really good shot on the Patriot's Fist, broke through its shields and put some damage on it, and then didn't realize that I knew I was going to ram it. but I didn't think about how I was still within distance 1 to 2 of the rift. So I
Okay.
rammed it, went back onto an asteroid, and took a face up. And then because I was at 1 to 2 of the rift, I rammed it again because of that speed 1 maneuver that it requires of you,
Yep.
and hit the asteroid again and pulled a structural. So I put 5 damage directly on the Liberty in round 2 with just some kind of, rash flying.
Yeah.
Kind of what I was talking about a minute ago of, just getting a little too excited about kind of a cheeky maneuver, and trying to seize a moment that really backfired. From then on, the day just kind of it did unravel on me a little bit. I went up against some really good players and had some really bad dice rolls. I told Ryan when we were there at the end of day 1, I was like, man, it was just a bad day to have a bad day. And yeah, that was that was day 1. But lots of fun, really cool fleets on the other side of the table. The third fleet was a Mahdi, 2 ISDs with a Gladiator, or with an Architon, sorry. And then that was a totally defensively built fleet, with expert shield techs on both, and early warning systems on all 3 ships.
Okay.
So just totally neutralized all my bombers, and made it so that every time that damage was coming at him, he was just reducing damage constantly. Wasn't able to get 14 on both of them, and he got away. And then the last game was against another rebel. I played a Radis nesting doll fleet, where he had Radis on an MC30, drop the Providence, or dropped the Profundity. Apologies.
Yep. Yep.
And then dropped a Gorell's Honor out of the Profundity. And I had never played against Radis before. I, of course, knew how Radis worked, and had actually played with Radis before, but never against a really good player with him. And that hurt. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Some really cool fleets and some really good players.
Did you come back with any design changes to your Dodonna list? If you want to keep, or if you're going to keep flying it, is there any? You said you had mentioned dice fixing. So
Yeah,
does that mean like LTTs instead of XI7s, or how would you tweak your list?
that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I really love my list, and it does really well in like a Texas meta where you're going up against a lot of big ships all the time and light squadrons. But I think that I probably would change XI7s maybe to LTTs. I've thought about dropping gunnery teams, which is a really hard choice with the Liberty, because it's got that nasty front arc and everything. But maybe dropping gunnery teams and doing Kitekin and Cholin, something like that. So choices to be made. I think I'm going to hang up Dodonna for a little while, and play with some other fleets, since it isn't, this is what I know and I need to practice for Worlds anymore. It's now, let's play the game again and experiment and mess around with stuff. So
Yeah,
very excited for that.
Yeah, there's after any tournament or any kind of sustained amount of tournaments, I do usually just have to have a palate cleanser, afterwards, just because I just get kind of sick and tired of playing the same fleet over and over again. So yeah, after a long season, it's good just to pick up something fresh, just to get your brain working in a different way.
A bunch of
for a little
janky
while.
stuff.
Yeah, and just stuff that's fun and goofy and
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how I fly all the time.
So, one last question for me, and then I want to let Josh have a chance to jump back in here. Can you summarize your day 2 and 3 experiences? I know some of you, one of you took a break from Armada for a bit, and I think was it Austin? Did you do the team play?
I played both day 2 and 3 with Armada. Day 2 was sector fleets. Being a new player, I hadn't really gotten the chance to mess with sector fleets, and that's just a blast. It's ridiculous. Rounds take so long, and there's so many ships on the table and everything. I will say, I made the comment at one point during that day that is what it felt like Armada, like that. That's what I always imagine Armada to be whenever it's on the table, and like the imagination is running, like all of these big ships flying around it,
Yeah.
And it was really cool and a lot of fun. And then, day 3 was the team play. We had a Texas team with Drew Honey Badger, or Drew, who is Texas Honey Badger in the Discord, and then Mike, who is ATX Mike in the Discord. And then Ryan and I. So we had a full Texas team and had a pretty good day 3. We got some good wins in and everything until we went up against the other Texas team on day 3,
Right.
and kind of ran into each other. So yeah,
that's pretty awesome. That's the kind of thing, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit. But just the community in an Armada tournament, and just like, even after maybe a tough day, it's super easy for everybody to be like, all right, let's play again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, how can you summarize your day 2 and 3 experiences? What did you spend your time doing?
So my day 2 was I did not sign up for sector fleets because I didn't feel like bringing or having to think about doing an 800 point list. Which even though it's easy to do with the SSD, I just didn't feel like really playing sector fleet. As much as I love sector fleet, just didn't feel like playing it. So what I did is I just hung around, got to interact with people in the community, especially from other countries. I got to meet quite a few of the Polish guys that did really well in the teams event on day 3. And a lot of people, myself included, just end up playing Star Wars Unlimited. And so there were, while Armada's going on several tables, we had a bunch of card games going on the next tables. Mostly it was just, reaching out, meeting people, interacting with, people I've met on the Discord and stuff like that. So it was just a good old conversation day and community outreach kind of thing. And then day 3 we were on the teams event, which was mostly just having fun, trying to strategize picks against different fleets and stuff like that. It was but a lot more laid back than the actual World's tournament was.
Just time to have fun.
That was a really fun and cool component of day 3, though, was like trying to kind of out strategize the other team in the beginning pairings, because you're trying to pair strengths against weaknesses and all that kind of stuff. That was a really cool component.
Yeah.
Like in the second round of the teams event, we threw ATX Mike, unfortunately, at a really good Akbar fleet, because it was the way it was set up was going to destroy everybody else's. And we're like, okay, we'll sacrifice him, and then we'll win the rest of the 3 games, which we did.
We did do that, yeah.
Nice. All right. So, building off kind of what Chris said a moment ago, I've been to Worlds last year. I did not get the chance to go this year, but I went last year. I played in LCQ, and knowing that I was kind of new to the Armada competitive scene, I took something that I thought was fun and decided I was just going to have a good time at Worlds. While my buddy went on to go out of the LCQ, excuse me, and then play on in Worlds. But I had an excellent time hanging out and watching. That was actually my favorite part, was just watching good Armada players play Armada and learning so much from that. So that was my kind of sense of the community. Also, was being surrounded by like-minded people who were also sitting there watching the die rolls and drinking a little bit and just also basically sitting on the edge of your seat watching all this excellent gameplay. But that was my experience of the community and the atmosphere afterward. I was curious what you guys experienced while you guys weren't playing.
Yeah, so the community in general, when not playing, was just so friendly. I mean, it's really neat to be able to interact with so many people, A, from around the country, B, from around the world, and then C, just who all love the same thing. It was so refreshing because going into that environment as somebody who's never been in that sort of environment in general before. I mean, I'd been in at the Lone Star Open and the LSO and some other tournaments, but nothing that high stakes competitive. Uh, I was concerned the entire time that whenever I was going to be at the table, it was going to be this serious, really intense experience. And it wasn't the entire time. Of course, everybody was paying attention to rules and stuff like that, but it was just another person who really loved Armada on the other side of the table, and that extended across everybody. Everyone was just there to have a good time pushing plastic spaceships around the table, and it was really fun.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Ryan, would you like to share on your experience?
So yeah, off the table. I mean, on the table, people were great, but off the table, yeah, it was really, really nice interactions that I had. Pretty much across the board. Everyone that you talked to was, great to interact with. Sharing ideas, hearing stories, like how'd you end up at Worlds, and like I can't harp on like how nice the Polish guys were. Like those guys were a whole lot of fun just to interact with. They were all having the time of their lives. It was great.
That's awesome. Did you, when you were chatting with them, how did they kind of describe their meta over there? Is there any significant differences?
Well, pretty much everywhere is opposite of the Texas meta, and
Okay.
I mean, very very few other places are such big ship heavy metas. They were all running largely squadron based fleets, and then one of them was running the cog.
And the Starhawk.
Yeah, there was the Starhawk. Yeah.
I didn't get to talk to as Peter's name. Yeah, I didn't. He was like I think the only person on the Polish team that I didn't get to talk to really because he was playing in day 2 and 3 for Worlds. So I didn't really feel like I should go up and bother him. Just be like, hey man, I met everybody else on your team. Just wanted to interrupt your game and say hi.
They hid
Hi.
him away. They said we got to keep him like he's pitching a perfect game.
Right.
Yeah, nobody talked to him. Nobody say anything. He's
Yeah.
doing really good. But yeah, the rest of the guys were running, good mixed fleets. I don't think anyone was running. None of the guys that I talked to were like running like a Sloan or something like that. But they were running good, mixed fleets where it was a lot more objective play and having like good squadron interaction, not just a pitiful screen or going heavy in, but I'd say just overall good mixed fleets.
All right, cool. With that, what was your personal highlight or your favorite aspect of Worlds? We can go right back to Ryan.
So I didn't really have a great like personal highlight moment. 'Cause most of my games did fairly poorly for me towards as far as wins goes, but I'd say my favorite moment had to be just overall the teams event. I thought that was run very intuitively. The strategy they used, the strategy that they employed, having to like outthink your opponents and decide who was going to fight who, and really using they're building your team's fleets around various strengths and weaknesses to try and do well across the board. I thought was a lot of fun. That was the most fun moment I had was doing all that.
Austin, what about you what was your personal highlight for Worlds?
I think personal highlight was probably like actually in game on day 3. I beat during the team event. I beat a Polish onager and that fleet and did it pretty handedly, and that was a lot of that was pretty pride, morale boosting after a admittedly kind of tough weekend when it came to the game itself. Um, so that kind of put a little bit of wind back in my sails as we headed back to Texas and everything.
Right.
The overall like personal highlight, honestly, was the friends we made along the way. It was just really cool, especially the Texas community. I'd interacted with some of the other guys in the Texas community that were going to Worlds. Got to meet a few of them before then and everything. But the Texas community overall, there was a Worlds coordination chat. Everybody was checking in on each other as we were all getting to Worlds on various days. After day 1, everyone went and got dinner together, and that kind of happened again the other days. It was incredibly supportive, and this kind of camaraderie of like, there was the Polish team and there was the German team and there was like, and then there was the Texas team, and it was really cool.
Yeah. When you first said that, I mean, I laughed, but it was a genuine laugh of, just in agreement with what you're talking about, and the community and the camaraderie. Is fantastic. A lot of really good players that are very encouraging. And once they want to win, but they also want you to do well. And, it's like you don't always get that, I think, in a competitive scenario.
I think that one of the few silver linings to how little is being put in to the game at the moment in terms of plastic and new components and everything. I think one of the few silver linings is that it feels like the people who really love this game work really hard to make sure that it stays alive, and work really hard to not only bring new players in, but get new players excited about it. And you could really feel that at Worlds. I mean, it was lots of people just encouraging everyone and getting, added on Discord so that we can chat about fleets from now on and doing that sort of thing. Even the most experienced, like veteran players were just constantly working to make sure that the community really felt like the strong part of Worlds, not the gameplay.
I agree. I think I've never played another miniatures game other than this, but it does amaze me the longevity this game has had. I think is very much largely due to the content creators. Like Krabic was the first one I was aware of. The Ion Radio guys. I mean, like there's so much good content out there that the player base maintains itself, and I think that good-natured aspect that most Armada players have. I mean, I think that's a big part of keeping it together. But yes, the individual efforts of so many people has been huge for this game.
I would agree, Chris. Actually, I do want to throw out a shout out to the Armada podcast. We'll call it the cousin to our podcast. They also do a great job putting out content with a lot of in-depth analysis from Mr. Armchair Jedi as well, which I think everyone in the community is very grateful for the amount of data collection that has been going on from him and from others in the community. But going back to Worlds, Austin, now that you've been to Worlds, what advice, would you have for new players that want to go to Worlds? And would you go again?
I would absolutely go again. That's an easy, don't need to elaborate a ton. Yes, I would absolutely go again. I think the thing that I would tell new players, having been one myself for a little while now, and still really am, um, play as many games as you can. Uh, Listen to podcasts. Look at the T4s from the big tournaments and see what the winners are running. I know that sounds a little daunting at first, but the community is so well integrated that a lot of that information is accessible. And I would say just playing games with your buddies around town as well as going to events. Just speaking to DFW specifically, I know that we have tournaments fairly frequently. I believe we try and have one once a month, and we try to have pretty frequent interactions like that. Um, Come on out. The environment is always going to be welcoming, always going to be friendly because the folks that are running it want you to be there. It's not, yes, it's technically a competitive environment, um, but it really isn't. It's not nearly as scary as you think it's going to be. It's just going to be playing a game for the morning and afternoon with other folks across the table from you who really love that game too here in town. And it's gonna make you a lot of friends too. I think that those are probably the first steps to getting to Worlds. Come out and play. Uh, can't get to that next level without being at the first level. So
Yeah, I would like to hop on to the end of that and say that if someone is listening to this and they are interested in Armada and they don't know where to get started, um, they can find us on Facebook at what is it, Chris?
DFW Trinity
Yeah.
Fleet Command.
So you can reach out to us on there, or you can find a local community that plays Armada, and I'm certain that someone will come out with you, loan you some ships, and teach you how to play. It's the community's that good right now. What about you, Ryan? Now that you've been to Worlds, what advice would you have for a new player wanting to go, and would you go again?
So I would, given the opportunity, I would absolutely go again. It was a lot of fun and great time meeting so many other people that yeah, given the chance, I would definitely go again. My advice to new people is just hop on and try different things. When I got around to the tournament that got me my ticket to Worlds was only like my second time playing the SSD in like a year. And I just happened to do well enough to land a Worlds ticket with a fleet that I wasn't expecting to be overly competitive. So like if you're a new player and you don't really know what might be competitive, what could like win you games, win you tournaments, is just fly things that you think sound good, sound fun, and there is a meta for a reason, and things that exist outside the meta are stuff that people aren't expecting. And so just fly what you have, fly what you feel comfortable flying, and
Yeah,
probably
I
still
agree. I
do
think
pretty well.
especially early on in the game, you want to pick up as many archetypes as you can because you're going to gravitate to some more than others kind of intuitively after you play them a couple times, and that's where you start to develop kind of your personality as a player or as a player. It's like, do I tend to be more aggressive? Am I more cautious? Do I want? So it's like if you just pick up one type of fleet and don't ever try the other ones, I think it's more difficult to excel.
All right. So with that, um, we're going to wrap up the podcast by asking one final question. This is going to be our kind of fun part of the podcast. Some other podcasts have their own little shtick, but this one I think we're going to call it something like elevation or elevated, and in the background I'll add in some angel voices singing or something as we ascend.
Wow.
Yeah, as we ascend or elevate one card that is currently not being used or not being underutilized, uh, and giving suggestions on how it could be made better, and so to where it can be seen on the table more often. So I'll go ahead and start us off. The card I want to elevate is maybe the most basic, that being Darth Vader, the Squadron from release. So currently, Darth Vader is in a TIE Advanced, and he has Escort. So it makes him a pretty big target, and he just has those two braces. And into the current meta, which uh, I would think that most people agree that the current meta is the most balanced that it's ever been.
Yeah, I would
Although
agree.
there still is stuff in the background that has somewhat been left behind. So this card, specifically, I think would like to see more. I would like to see it played more on the table. But the way I would change it would be to add probably screen, um, and then with a caveat of uh, any damage taken from a screen reroll would be taken from the ties or the neighboring uh, the neighboring squadrons. So that's my elevated card. Uh, how about you, Chris? What would you elevate?
Um, I think a card that excited me and then disappointed me almost in the space of seconds as I read it was Independence for the MC80. It's 8 points on a squadron command. Each squadron you activate may increase its speed to 4 until the end of its activation. But then the next sentence, squadrons that change speed in this way cannot attack this activation. And it's, I've always wanted just to be able to do it where Independence sends 4 B-Wings at somebody and gets to attack with them. I think, if you want to leave the price point where it is and take away that stipulation where you can't attack, it's still worth 8 points to be able to do that. And I think that's a relatively easy fix. I think there's comparable cards that have a powerful effect like that, and I think that's the sort of easy change, where people might start picking up MC80s again. It's an underutilized ship just because of it's a wave 1 or 2 ship. So I think stuff like that would get people looking at them again, and that would also go hand in hand with an overall points adjustment, just kind of rebalancing across the waves that I think needs to happen. But my pick would be to save Independence. Should be a good card.
I think that's a good pick. What about you, Austin?
Well, so the card that I probably would make a change to, it's a pretty simple change, but it's more so in response to kind of the overall rebel faction and something that I feel like is missing in for the rebels. I really think that Kaitkin and Sholin should be a officer and not a gunnery team or a weapons. Oh, what is it?
It's a weapons team, yeah.
Yeah, weapons
Yeah.
team. Yeah, so I really think that they should be an officer. They're a unique pairing, the two of them. I know that technically means they're a team, but I think they should be an officer because the rebels right now really don't have that kind of dice fixing in an officer slot. There's Torrenfar, but that affects other ships. And there's a couple that are like kind of similar to that, but again, other ships is what they help.
Yeah.
I really think that the rebels need a consistent, the Empire has Price and the Empire has Director Krennic and that sort of thing for the rebels that can fit into that officer slot. And I think they seem like the perfect opportunity to just make that one simple change, and you would see them a lot more than you currently do, which is not minimal, but
Well, there's at least 2 future podcast episodes that could be dedicated to parts of what you just were talking about. And like I started thinking about, well, are we looking for complete balance and equity across the factions. For every price, there's a rebel price, there's a CIS price, or is the game more interesting when fleets can be sometimes wildly asymmetric, where something like Mercy Mission, right? Or, it's like that's one faction that benefits from that and that's it. It's like, do we want, I guess, parity is the word I'm looking for, or is the asymmetry good for the game?
Personally, I say I like the asymmetrical side because then the
Mhm.
fleets really feel like they have their identities. Like the Imperial fleet, you mentioned price, taking hits off your shield to decide what you want to do for damage feels very Imperial. I don't care about myself, any of my ships or whatever, but I am going to kill you.
I think a little change that could be made would be having a generic officer for the rebels that gives the ship the Mon Calamari Exodus Fleet title, essentially. So you could pair it with another Mon Calamari ship, so it acts as a support ship, but then they both get that benefit of that title. I think that's something that would be very rebel and would be fitting in that faction.
Yeah.
That sure does sound like a future podcast episode.
Yeah.
We can talk more about that this stuff later, but let's wrap up the final elevation card with Ryan.
So my pick as a Empire player definitely is gonna be the Victory as a ship. I don't. It holds that dear place in all old Empire players' hearts as it was our first ship, and we love it dearly because it should be better than it is. But now, what to change on it? I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think the whole game could do with a points rebalancing, but individually, just the Victory. I don't know if it's going to be add an extra defense token, change its nav chart because its nav chart's just abysmal, even for Empire ships. So I'm not sure exactly what needs to change on the Victory to make it better, but something to make it viable where you don't have to dump the entire upgrade slots on it to make it even okay.
Go ahead, Austin.
I was just going to say one way that you could do that was by doing kind of what they did with the IST, where you put out like two new models, essentially, like the Kuat and the, what is it?
Simoon.
Yeah, the Simoon. Yeah, the Kuat and the Simoon, where those are wholly different versions of that ship, and just have it be, a different speed chart on one, and maybe a little. It'd be really cool if they started playing around with hull and everything, where like one had a different speed chart, but it had one less hull or something like that. It'd be very fun, I think, but that's one way that you could do that.
Well, all right. To wrap up, I would just like to say here in the Dallas community, we are interested in the development of current players and new players. So with that, you should be on the lookout for in the future something that we're putting together, which is going to be a league on our Star Wars Armada league. The idea for that is that you can bring any number of fleets to any engagement, and then you can fine tune a fleet or try out something new, and it'll be in a competitive setting, and it'll take place over about 6 weeks or more. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, putting it on. But with that, I'd like to wrap up by signing off. So this has been Captain Ketter on the Speculation Station.
This is Chris. Thanks for listening.
This is Austin, Sir Reidiculous on Discord.
And this is Ryan, Plague of Shadows on Discord. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're very excited to chat with you guys.
I'm looking forward to more conversations. Honestly, it's been a great time getting to talk to you guys. All right, and with that, I would like to say, may the dice be with you, and as the Master of the Fleet guys on YouTube would say, always be nabbing.